Robbo.
Streaming across the globe, Ben Norris, Rob McKnight, and David Robinson.
Ben, Robbo. News, reviews, entertainment news. It's the Ben, Robbo. Ben, Robbo Show. Ben, Robbo Show.
Welcome to the Ben, Rob and Robbo Show. Here's Rob McKnight.
We've made it. It's episode 2. Welcome to the Ben, Rob and Robbo Show. I'm Rob McKnight and I'm joined by some pretty amazing people. Hello, Ben Norris. Hello, David Robinson. Here we are, episode 2. Did you think we'd make it, Ben?
I didn't think I was going to make it. I feel much more relaxed today, and I've got a question for you.
Yes.
Have you had a shower today?
I have. Ben knows I was so busy today because we're still finding our groove and our rhythm. And literally, once we started streaming the countdown, I went and had a shower. So that's our time.
I haven't
That's
showered
impressive.
for the past 2 days, so that's the truth, the honest truth.
Now, what I'm loving with the NBN at the moment, Robbo, is we do all our tech checks at 12:30. You sounded great. I know you're sounding like a Dalek again, but you know what? We'll go with it today. Giving me an exterminate.
Exterminate.
Oh, wow.
Actually sounded pretty good. So we're going to have to get to the bottom of why you suddenly go Dalek the moment we go to air. And that's the thing with internet streaming. We are in a new space. I'm very excited. Someone said to me, why isn't this on TV? And I said, who cares? We're in a new space where we can do our own things and enjoy the experience of it. And I really do believe this is the forefront of where we're going. Anyway, that's our reason for being here. Let's get into the news topics of the day. And it appears that there's going to be one less bird in the sky, with Virgin Australia announcing this morning that the airline is going into voluntary administration. Despite potential lifelines from the New South Wales and Queensland governments, the federal government has rejected the airline's calls for help. Virgin founder Richard Branson has written an open letter to the employees of the company around the world. In Australia, Virgin employs over 16,000 people. Robbo, should we bail them out?
Look, Rob, if we do bail them out, as I said, I think yesterday, we should own them. The government and the people should own them. I think it's really important not to let them go down. I think we're fairly lucky back when Ansett went down. Virgin Blue was kind of just a fledgling airline there, but at least there was some kind of competition. This is the big problem, because in between Ansett and Virgin Blue really taking a stranglehold, really, airfares went up. Monopoly is not good for anyone, and it shouldn't happen. But there are 16,000 jobs here at stake. There is an argument that it is because it was badly managed financially. So they do have $5 billion worth of debt, which is a big problem. Part of the Queensland government bailout, part of their terms was that they would restructure their debt. New South Wales didn't put the same limit on them. They just said they had to move their hub out to Western Sydney when that was built. I do really think we should bail them out. The government, the federal government, is saying
I've got to ask you this question. The government is specifically saying it is not in the habit of owning basically businesses, although it does own the railway lines. It was a big part of Qantas for many years. It did own Telstra. Is there anything wrong with the government owning an airline that would be in competition with Qantas? Does that give Virgin then an unfair advantage?
I wouldn't think so. It gives everyone else an advantage. And this is the thing we've got to worry about, is that this pandemic has made the whole world change. So the idea of saying that, we shouldn't own it might give unfair advantage. Well, the best advantage it is to have two airlines is for the people and for the travelling public. I really believe, though, that we should own whatever we bail them out. So we don't bail them out. It's not free cash. We just give them the money. We then own that percentage stake in a business sense. I think it's unfair that we would just go, oh, you've got to go and that kind of thing. I just don't think that'll work for the rest of us.
Although, Ben, can I ask you this question? Is it we live in a capitalist society. Is it down to the fact that a business should live and die no matter what's happening? They take the spoils when there are financial windfalls. But when we are in a crisis, we are in a pandemic, that's absolutely true. Is it the government's job to bail business out?
Well, it can't be, because at the end of the day, as much as jobs is very important, and I feel for the employees of Virgin, the government can't start bailing out everyone who's finding financial difficulty. And I think this is one of those things where it's really difficult to watch it unfold. It's terrifying and horrific to watch people lose jobs. But I just think, are we opening up a pathway to government having to financially come into aid for everyone? You know,
Absolutely.
No, but I disagree. I think that you can look at it on a merit-based system. I think that for an airline, we need two airlines in this country. We've seen what happens before when Qantas has the monopoly, and that's not good. So I think that the government should have the freedom and the flexibility to be able to go, this is an industry we should bail out. This is a company we should bail out. And remember, when I say bail out, I don't mean giving them free money. But
Yes.
I really think that we've seen before in this country what happens domestically when you only have one domestic carrier. And that is a very big problem, because Qantas, the flying kangaroo, as much as we love her, she can't help but get a bit greedy, a bit Scrooge McDuck when it comes to the cash.
I can
Well,
see
let's-
that where you're coming from, Robbo. Like, I think that is sometimes a bit of an issue. But I think when it comes to, I'm sort of maybe going back on what I was saying before, because maybe airlines, specifically, is one of the industries where government has to stand in. It's a really difficult situation.
Well, let's move on, and it's finally happened. The fractured relationship between the NRL and its CEO, Todd Greenberg, has ended. NRL Chairman Peter Valance has informed senior management that Greenberg had stepped down. It's been a rough couple of months for Greenberg, with major issues around sponsorship, management, and his relationship with Flanders. Ben, in these tough times, is it fair that he goes? I mean, he had a fractured relationship with Channel 9, that's for sure.
Look, it's a really difficult time at the moment, and I think that if people aren't performing in jobs right now at a time where everyone does need to perform, then I think unfortunately it is time to go for some people. And I think, in this particular situation, when we don't know all the facts at the moment, I think it is what it is.
I actually agree with you. I think it's interesting, the pressure that's placed when we're talking $130 million Nine declared to the stock exchange they would save if the season didn't go ahead. That's a lot of influence on a game, and if you're not getting on with the people who are paying such big checks, there is a problem with you're not bigger than the game. So if you can't work with the people investing in the game, and there have been reports about money going through basically a wastage of money, Robbo, should the networks have some influence over who's running the game?
Well, there's been reports that the NRL initially was spending $500,000 a day.
That's just
a couple of months ago, which is outrageous, isn't it? And I think that's what the big problem with Nine is that we gave Nine gave the NRL $50 million loan, and it's not being spent correctly. So what we're looking at here is broadcast rights, which that's part of the deal. That's what the sporting environment is at the moment. But at the same time, also, this industry that has partnered with the NRL for so long is also giving a $50 million loan. That's a big deal coming from a free-to-air broadcast network in Australia. They had obvious worries about the way that the NRL was managing that money, and I think it's fair to say that they do have a case there. It's just, again, it's like ego, isn't it? There's always egos with these kind of things. Nine does absolutely have a stake and should have a say when spending $130 million in this day and age. It's just outrageous. The other thing is, though, that we are very open for the Ben, Rob and Robbo show for taking the rights, the NRL rights. We're available. This is the future. So hop on board and let's
We'll take it.
Get a goal, get a try.
What I loved, Robbo, is you used the royal we when talking about Channel 9, and I was about to say, is there something you haven't told us? Is Robbo making going to be
This
making
is my
his
last show,
debut on
guys.
Channel 9?
It's been a wonderful ride. We've had so many great memories. Let's take a look at those memories now.
That memory would be,
memories at the
damn,
moment?
what's going on? I'm in the opener. Let's move on.
Fade him out.
Yeah.
And Australia is at the forefront of trying to get a vaccine for COVID-19, but a landmark trial will not get access to one of the most promising drugs in the fight against the virus. And if I can just get my auto cue working. The Daily Telegraph is reporting Gilead, the US pharmaceutical company that makes the drugs, says the Australian trial does not form part of their global research program. Now, this isn't out. Robbo, this sounds like it's putting profits before lives.
100% right, Rob. I agree with you wholeheartedly. This is classic big pharma behavior. This is what they do. So for a while there was the HIV drug that could help prevent. It's called PrEP. And they were charging people in America $1,000 for a month's worth of that drug. In Australia, we don't have to worry about that. It's about $8, a week or something like that. It's very, very cheap. Don't quote me on those numbers. But this is the thing. Big Pharmaceutical doesn't care about lives. This is the 100% truth. If you think that Pfizer and Gilead and all these kind of people are worried about actual people's lives, you are remiss in your thoughts. They are all about profits, and that's what's really worrying. The fact is, this is a global pandemic. So surely a global pandemic would warrant a global get-together and a global team to work through it. We've got some of the best scientists here in Australia working on the vaccine that we need. And this is kind of outrageous to go, well, you're not part of our program. What an absolute pile of horse manure.
I absolutely agree
rubbish.
with you. And we've certainly seen companies around the world giving out the ingredients for what they're doing to try and help a worldwide pandemic. Remember recently, Ben, I'm going back a year or so, there was that CEO who bought up the rights to some drug and said, well, I'm privatizing it. If you want, you're going to have to pay. And while everyone turned against him, there was nothing stopping him from what he was doing. He was out to make a buck. And, you know, there is no doubt pharmaceuticals are about making money. And that's why they're some of the biggest, you know, stocks on the share market, really.
Yeah, but they also help to create illnesses that aren't there. So one of the
hang
really
on, are we
famous
going
ones
down?
is in the mid.
I think we're going down
Are
a
we
rabbit
going
hole
down
here.
paranoid
think that-
situations
I
here?
think that
No, this is true.
Yeah.
They were creating illnesses that weren't there. So in the mid-2000s in America, there was a big pharmaceutical company that developed what was called the restless leg syndrome. It doesn't exist. Some people, when they go to sleep, as they're going to sleep, they feel a bit funny in their legs. It's not, but they created it as a syndrome.
I've heard
is
of restless
documented.
leg
Look it up.
syndrome. Is this really true,
It's
Robbo?
not. It's not real. It's
You know-
not real. But big pharma in America created these issues where we've got a restless leg, so we've got a pill for that. We've got a pill for this. We've got a pill for that. Big pharma. It angers me constantly that they do not get the scrutiny that they should get. And when you put profits above lives, that's a problem. And we're all complicit with that, and I think it's outrageous. When you create diseases or disorders to sell a pill that doesn't do anything is outrageous. Stand by that.
I think there's a
Yeah, but I
feature
think in
that.
that situation, they're going to need to make sure that with particular things like that they're being policed. You know, like, to me, that sounds like a whole bit of conspiracy theory mumbo jumbo, if
But
you
they're
ask
not
me.
being policed. No, they're not being policed because they can pay for it with the Therapeutic Goods Association here in Australia, the same way as that Swiss vitamins say all these crazy things. They're not policed. They're not regulated. You just have to put a little asterisk down the bottom of the Swiss thing. Is that, well, it may not help with your restless leg syndrome. This is just, you know, herbal. They're not policed. I believe the government and big pharma are in hand with each other. I do apologise for cutting you off, Ben. Go ahead.
Well, look, I was just going to say, I'm not talking about Swiss, but I remember there was a vitamin out there that said it was going to do something, and all it did was give me a really disgusting rash at the top of my lip. And I have to say that was really uncomfortable for me. And maybe people should stand in to make sure that that doesn't happen to other people as well. However, getting back to the point, Rob, I think, you know, greed is essentially king when it comes to the pharmaceutical world. And I think that we do need to be really careful about what products are being placed as something. At the end of the day, if they come up with a vaccine for this virus, get it out there as quickly as you can, make it cheap and affordable for everyone, and let's knock this thing on its head. You know,
Yeah,
let's
but that's the
not
dream.
have some
But will that
giant...
happen? Will it
Well, we
happen?
need to make sure that happens. Who makes that happen? We need to make sure those people step in.
Well, I think this is the problem why the US is actually in free fall, because they are putting money ahead of lives. You know, people are protesting because their liberties are being taken away while their government is trying to protect them. You know, I think we're going to see an interesting time ahead for the US because they are struggling with this. I saw a graphic today, and I haven't checked the validity of it, but there was a graphic on Twitter saying that America now has more cases of COVID-19 than the next 4 countries combined.
Yeah.
And that is how fast this thing is moving across the states because they are not putting the right precautions in. But when that vaccine comes, it's going to be very interesting, especially if it does come from the states. It's going to be very interesting to see how that's distributed to the world and at what price. Robbo, I would also like to say that you've really got me interested in these false illnesses like restless leg syndrome. So I think we will follow that up on a future episode of the Ben, Rob and Robbo show because I think there's a lot more in that I'm actually really fascinated by. Meanwhile, one of the most expensive airports in Australia is having a tough time from the pandemic. Sydney Airport says traffic has fallen by almost 100%, 97% in fact, since travel restrictions were announced. Management has has had to borrow $850 million to help it get through the crisis. Ben, I've got to say, is it bad of me not to care if Sydney Airport is doing it tough? They have gouged us through parking fees. Yeah, in Sydney, you catch the train to the airport, you have to pay an extra $13 or something. This is one business I don't care.
Yeah, okay, but that's your personal vendetta against it. I mean, come off it. I think, you know, Sydney Airport have had those prices there and they've had that monopoly on that for a very long time. And yes, they're having a bit of a comeuppance, but the reality is it's just a really sad situation for lots of people. Because when I think of...
Don't get me wrong, I agree with you on that. I agree with you. It is a bad situation for a lot of businesses, and you know, I'm all for helping out a lot of businesses. We were talking about whether we do or not earlier on in the show, but I do believe we should help businesses out, especially the smaller businesses. Big businesses make a lot of money, and that's where I think they have to plan for a rainy day, which is what Sydney Airport has to do.
Absolutely, they have to do that. And I think that what's the biggest problem in the world at the moment is that this was such a shock for so many people that people didn't have plans in place to, you know, be prepared for this. And unfortunately, Sydney Airport is just one of those, you know, in a very long list of people that have been caught out. And, it, you know, it's going to take a very long time once we get a handle of this virus to get everything back on track.
I think you're right. Well, let's move on. And another day and another Ellen is mean story. A Dutch beauty blogger who appeared as a guest on the show has said that after meeting Ellen, she says, don't meet your idols. Nikki de Jager said the daytime superstar was cold and distant and it wasn't a good experience. Robbo, well, I'm really getting the feeling Ellen's not a nice person. There's been a lot of stories coming out. She's almost as bad as you.
There are a lot of stories. Yeah. No, people love me. Look at this hair. The higher the hair, closer to gold. If I can quote Dolly Parton. I think when you look at this one, she was expecting to be treated like a queen, a star, and she said she was treated like the Teletubbies after dark. I think there's a lot of ego from this woman on this one. We've heard a lot of reports that Ellen being mean and things like that, but when you read or when you hear what she's actually had to say, this beauty blogger, sorry, I couldn't say that sentence without vomiting a little bit. It's almost the same as an influencer. Sorry, I'm so sorry. But she was saying, I was expecting it for all to be laid on for me and I'm a princess and blah, blah, blah. You know what? No, sweetie. You're a part of a television show that is watched by millions around the world. You're a small part of it and no one's heard of you because they don't even know how to pronounce your name, except though, Rob, I was very impressed with your pronunciation. I looked it up and that was spot on. But this is the thing.
It wasn't really a problem
is, No, it was. What I find an issue with this is there's lots of stories about Ellen going out there from crew members and things, like people who have direct contact with her. Yeah. This story is about a woman who thought it should be laid on thick for her, and it wasn't. So then she's using that to spread this thing that Ellen is cold and distant. Shut the hell up. You're on the Ellen show. She'd let you plug your business, essentially. You're a whinger. You're a no-hoper. You're a nothing. Head back to wherever you come from.
Ben?
I have a theory, though, and my theory that comes out of this is that when she's talking about never meet your idols, you know, that's her problem. I have to say, in my experience of meeting a lot of very well-known people, the people who I have an expectation the highest of always is the biggest letdown. And that happened to me going to the Logies one year. I was like, oh, I can't wait to meet X, Y, and Z. And they were all the ones that kind of let me down. I think sometimes we have too much of a higher expectation on Rebecca Gibney, and when you meet Rebecca Gibney and she's not Julie from Pack to the Rafters, she's actually not that nice, you are disappointed. But to jumping to her defense, the thing is, I had a huge expectation. Of course I'm going to be let down, and also people can have a bad day, and we all have bad days. And if you followed any of the three of us around, or ask Rob's wife, or you ask my partner about what we're like 24 hours a day.
Oh, here we go.
We're always that great.
Don't have a partner, Ben. Fine. You point out the first show. Yes, I'm single and whatever.
I'm trying to help you out. Come on. If anyone's out there right now, get on your Instagrams and hit up Robbo. He's single and he's a catch.
One thing I would say about the whole idea of meeting your idols, in my experience, it's always the ones chasing fame who are the nastiest, where the ones who have achieved real fame are usually the nicest people. And I cite Ms. Ida
100%.
Buttrose, who is coming up shortly on today's episode. She will be joining us live to talk about it's the Queen's birthday. She will also be talking about women's mags and, of course, the ABC. Now,
I'm so
Ida
excited about
Buttrose-
this. I think this will be brilliant.
Oh, I'm so excited that she's coming on. But look, she's coming on our show because she's one of the nicest people in the industry who goes above and beyond, believes in loyalty, believes in doing the right thing. And there wasn't much I asked of Ida that she didn't deliver. In fact, she pretty much delivered everything. And while we're doing plugs, Sam Dastiari is coming on very shortly to talk about Malcolm Turnbull's new book and his interview on the ABC last night. And Sam and I were having a chat on the phone, and I think we've got some disagreements, so that'll be interesting to see what happens there. But now it's time to get the very latest news headlines, and we turn to the Ticker newsroom with Aaron Young. Aaron, how are you doing today?
Yeah, doing really well. Loving the show, loving the diva attitudes, of course, which is exactly what I expect on day 2 of a program. So fantastic. Let's see if we can make 3 days, eh? Let's have a look at the news headlines today. It's not over yet for Virgin, we're being told. Virgin Australia's CEO says the airline will continue operating while in voluntary administration. Not collapsing, they tell us. The airline this morning officially placed into voluntary administration. At least 10 potential investors involved, some international, are understood to be circling the failed airline. Meanwhile, flight chaos for passengers of Virgin and also its low-cost carrier Tiger Air. Don't forget about them. They face an uncertain future too, especially for those with pre-booked tickets. And 9 million Velocity members still to understand what this means for those unused points. The reason we say that is because it's a separate entity, we are told, not being placed into voluntary administration. But how to use your points if you ain't got an airline? That's the question we're asking. Our other stories today, Trump stops immigration. The US President Donald Trump has announced the closure of his country's borders amid the COVID-19 crisis. He's taken on Twitter saying he will be signing an executive order to temporarily suspend immigration into the US. Travel to a number of countries still remains restricted to and from the United States. That's all because of coronavirus. A story we are following very closely, and I'll have a bit more on this after the news hit as well, guys. The North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, believed to be in a serious condition after heart surgery, according to intelligence sources being monitored by the United States. Daily NK reporting the North Korean leader has not been seen for more than a week after a cardiovascular procedure on the 12th of April, his health deteriorating as well in recent months. And take a look at this mob. Facebook has removed events in Nebraska, New Jersey, California, promoting protests against the stay-at-home orders amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The social media company will only take down anti-quarantine protest events if they defy government guidelines. The weather map now, and our beautiful shot there of Sydney Harbour. Make sure you always stay the same. Melbourne, sunny and 20, better than 25. Brisbane, 28 degrees, Perth, 25. Adelaide, 24. The local share market's fallen at the open this morning, as you might expect. And you can thank oil prices for that, because US prices back in positive territory just a little bit. They turned negative for the first time ever. That means it was worth less than zero. In the US, with news coronavirus almost reaching its peak, the S&P 500 climbing over 25% from its March low. Oil crashed to the lowest level in 20 years now overnight as well, meaning great news for those petrol prices. That's it, you're up to date. You are watching Ticker. Guys, I just want to let you know, in terms of that Kim Jong-un story, really interesting development. Over the past hour, we've seen some reports, would you believe, that Kim Jong-un is brain dead. This has come from NBC. They've put this up and they've cited 2 US sources, officials. They've then taken the post down and said, we are taking it down because we just want to be utterly cautious, but we are certain that this is correct. So reports from NBC, a bit all over the place. We certainly know that something's happened. It's obviously North Korea, but they're citing 2 sources within the US government saying that Kim Jong-un right now is brain dead. So
2 sources is pretty good,
we don't
Aaron.
know, obviously. Yeah.
2 sources
and
is pretty
NBC
good.
News, pretty trustworthy.
Yeah. Can you keep us updated? If something does come out, if you jump in, we'll certainly cross to you. I'd be interested to get an update on that. This is huge news coming into your newsroom at Ticker TV right now. Has there been any commentary on who would replace him if he is in fact dead?
Well, not at this stage. I mean, North Korea is one of those places where if anyone's going to replace you, they generally end up in front of a cannon, right? That's kind of what's been happening literally for the past. It's kind of like TV. But it's one of those things that we've been watching and waiting, who would it be? And that's why the US intelligence sources and industry will be watching so closely. You would have to say that for a story of North Korea, which has been huge over the past couple of years, we haven't really been talking about it for the past 6 months or so. And Kim Jong-un seems to have a bit of that Kevin Rudd relevancy deprivation syndrome. Malcolm Turnbull's got it now too, where he has to come up with something. So what's better than coronavirus? Brain dead.
Well, we'll certainly be keeping an eye on that one. And for all the latest, we will certainly be tuning into the Ticker newsroom. So thank you, Aaron. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Of course.
Well, each day at around this time, we'll be bringing you an interview with our team of regulars, with each one looking at a specific topic. On Mondays, Steve Malk is talking TV. Tuesdays, we're talking politics with former Senator Sam Dastyari. That's coming up in just a moment. On Wednesday, the list king, Bruno Boucher, joins us. And on Thursday, the fabulous Joe Casamento will be talking movies and pop culture. But today, it's politics. And finally, something has bumped COVID-19 off the front pages. Malcolm Turnbull has thrown a grenade at his former colleagues in the Liberal Party with the release of a tell-all new book. Politically, what will be the fallout? Let's find out from former federal Senator Sam Dastyari. Sam, welcome to the Ben, Rob and Robbo show. Ben, keep talking, Sam. We've lost your audio.
I wonder whether or not we could just play some audio from when he was on I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here.
Right.
And he could just mime along with it.
Dubbing
It's
it.
not you.
Do you know what?
Your
This
audio's not
is
working.
perfect. People have been trying to shut Sam up for ages, but Sam, it seems like your microphone isn't on. We're not getting any actual audio from you at the moment. So let's cut away from Sam for the moment. We'll come back while Sam works out his audio feed, and I'll let him know. Guys, this is really interesting what's happening with Malcolm Turnbull. The interview on 7:30 Report last night, it was fascinating. It's interesting today. The government is trying to say that it's irrelevant because we're dealing with a crisis. Ben, do you think it is relevant, even though we are dealing with a crisis, of Malcolm Turnbull having his chance to speak and say what he wants?
Look, I think this book is a long time coming, and I think, the career that Malcolm Turnbull had leading up to being the PM is something that people have been discussing for a very long time. To me, he had a particular stance leading up until him being elected, and then sort of once he got into power, he kind of changed a little bit. I mean, he was kind of the Liberal PM that probably was going to be more favourable with the Labor supporters. And so, look, I think there's two different parties that are going to be very interested in finding out about this book. And do you know what's also really powerful at the moment? Is reading and listening to audiobooks whilst we're in, this isolation. So why can't this man release a book that plenty of people want to read, regardless of the subject matter?
Robbo, what do you think? Should he have changed the timing of this book?
Not at all. I agree with Ben there. I think that just because the coronavirus has stopped so many parts of our lives, it doesn't mean it needs to stop everything. So I think that's really important. With this, life goes on and people want to see other things. I know for a fact, and I've spoken to a few other journo friends who are saying, it'd be nice if we could package up all the coronavirus stuff in the first or the second half of your hour-long news, and then kind of really get into some other news. So I think this is quite welcome. His reasoning, as I watched 7:30 last night, his reasoning was that things go on. It's an Australian publisher, an Australian printer, an Australian writer. It's an Australian story. I think that's a fantastic reason to put it out there. Anyone who is putting forward the argument that
we do have Sam, Robbo. Finish your thought, but just letting you know we do have Sam.
Good. Anyone who thinks that it's ill-timed is just trying to deflect from other issues of the day. That's the most important thing, and also deflect from the fact that they've probably written about in the book, and they're idiots. But let's join Sam now. Sam joins us now live.
Okay.
Sam, good morning to you.
I'm sorry. Malcolm Turnbull is a self-indulgent narcissist, which has never been a precursor to being successful in politics.
Well, that's the point, isn't
You don't
it,
have anything
Sam?
in common with him?
So, look, think about Malcolm is, okay? Malcolm is a complete and utter fraud, and it's always only about Malcolm. Look, my issue with Malcolm isn't that he put his book out now obviously they had it in pre-production. It was ready to go. It's being emailed out everywhere. I mean, they're suing people for kind of emailing it around. So all of those things it was already in place to go. That's, that was already set to go. But it's look, everything is always about Malcolm and his ego. And here is my real beef with this book, right? You live by the sword, you die by the sword, right?
Well,
you
you
cannot be
certainly did
responsible. Oh, mate, mate, there was more knives in people's backs because of me. My parents actually own a knife shop. That was the ongoing joke in the later party. Right?
So, Sam, let me ask you this, though. I have a feeling that if your controversy happened now, you'd survive. Did you...
Look, sure, but it's about right place, right time, depending on the controversy, depending on what's happening there. As I've said before, there are people in politics who've gone for less, and a lot of people that have survived worse. It's about where you are, when you're there, at what time. You got to move on and live with these things. But no, I'm not getting away from this Malcolm thing, right? Okay, here is the bigger. He knifed Brendan Nelson. Then he knifed a sitting Prime Minister, right, in Tony Abbott. Right? Politics is politics, right? That's the business they're in. But to then turn around and talk about coup and horrible and how awful it was what, Morrison and them did to him, that is the game. That's the business, right? If you're going to be out there spearing people, you can't be surprised when they turn on you. And that was the thing about Malcolm. He always thought he was above it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in some ways, but I mean, this is your personal opinion. I mean, you're just saying all of this stuff about him being a narcissist and all the rest of it and, pulling apart his story. This is this man's truth, and you're allowed to tell your truth, and people shouldn't judge you for that. We don't have to be so sensitive. Sam, I don't necessarily understand. Do you have a personal vendetta against him, or, have you read the...
No, look, I mean, I've had run-ins with heaps of people in politics, no more so Malcolm than anyone else. My issue
and
with
you will
him
have a chance to write
do,
that book at that time.
Well, but my issue with him more has to do with the way he presents himself in it as the kind of, and you put your truth out there, people out to come and criticize it. I think there's not, by the way, I think it's a good thing former prime ministers writing books about their legacy. I don't think there's anything bad about that. What I kind of was frustrated by, and I saw it in an interview last night, was this whole holier-than-thou attitude. I mean, the disappointment with Malcolm isn't that he's succumbed to the right wing of his party. Right? That's the perception out there, especially in the intelligentsia, is that, look, Malcolm had really good principles, but Malcolm sold out to the right wing of his own party for power. It's actually worse than that. In my opinion, I think Malcolm only ever really cared about becoming Prime Minister. Becoming Prime Minister was the end in itself for him, and losing the Prime Ministership. The reason why it hurt him so much wasn't because he had this sense of my legacy wasn't able to be fulfilled, I didn't do a policy agenda, this, that. It's always so personal. It's never about the actual, policy agenda. But again, he's not unique in that. You have to have an undying sense of self-belief and self-worth to succeed in Australian politics. You have to be prepared to just
Sam,
take shit and keep
the
swallowing.
bells are going off there, Sam. You've got to, your speech is finished there. But I do appreciate, I'm just joking, I'm just having fun. I promise. But I agree with you wholeheartedly. Malcolm Turnbull has this image that he projects where he was this massive reformer and this, new blood into the prime ministership. But I agree with you. The problem is that as soon as he got into power, this is the great thing about media is everything gets recorded. So he was saying things like, I support gay marriage and I support climate change. And then he gets in power. I agree wholeheartedly. He became drunk on power more so than actually getting things done. So to hear someone, especially from the most gay electorate in Australia, Wentworth, for him to come in and go, actually, no, we need to do it this way.
You need to say which one it was.
Sorry, what's that?
That's right. No, I'm giving it. But no, I agree with you.
But that's the thing. He got in there, and all he wanted to do was to grab on and hold on to power, which meant forsaking all of the stuff that he believed in, which I thought was really, really poor for him. The other thing that I didn't like about the interview last night was that he took, again, the credit for same-sex marriage. No, you didn't at all. No. It was a plebiscite. It was a weak way of doing things. It's not a leader. And this idea that he keeps peddling the fact that he was the successful person to do that is outrageous and ridiculous. Your thoughts, Sam?
The story that I always remember about him, it's not even my story. Annabelle Crabb used to tell this story about the 2006. She tells it privately, so hey, I'm just breaking the confidence. What do I care?
I'm sure she's watching.
In the 2016 federal election, Kitchen Cabinet used to do this thing where during the campaign they do a meal with both the Prime Minister and the opposition leader and kind of do one episode each with the two of them, right? As you can imagine, making a show normally takes a full day. They don't have a full day in the middle of a campaign to give up for one TV show in the ABC one night. So they normally give them about 3-4 hours. So she shows up at, I think it was Daisy Turnbull's daughter's house, and they were meant to make some kind of dish. There, the daughter's house was easy to film, get him in, start filming, get out. But you got to make like 45 minutes of television. You got like 3 hours to do it. And Annabelle says that when she started talking to him, for the first 20, 30 minutes, he just wouldn't open up, didn't care, try and talk about policy, try and talk about the next agenda. And then she started talking about what it was like and felt like to be the Prime Minister, and bang, he was on. Like, that was the only thing that excited him. So I'm going to have a kind of controversial view.
So it is all about power, Sam.
Well, take Tony Abbott, right? I ideologically could not disagree with Tony Abbott more. The respect I have for Tony Abbott is this. Tony Abbott is not a fraud. Tony Abbott, in my opinion, is a right-wing nutcase. Other people think he's a patriot, but whatever, right? But
you heard it
his
here first.
policy agenda and what he believed was what he believed. He didn't come in with one thing and pretend another. And Malcolm, and unfortunately, Kevin Wright's a good friend of mine, but the same thing happened to Kevin as well, where people, when they think you're not authentic, and when they see that inauthenticity, and, Rob was talking about a minute ago with same-sex marriage, or with climate change, on so many different issues, they see that inauthenticity, and then you're dead to them. It's over.
But can I just say something? A lot of what you're actually talking about could be placed to many different prime ministers. I mean,
Definitely.
There was Julia Gillard also let us down in some ways when it came to marriage equality. Whilst she was good on climate change, there was lots of people who said they were going to do certain things if they got in, and then the wheels fell off. So, my question to you about Malcolm Turnbull is he? Do you say that he's alone with this, or can you see where I'm coming from?
No, I think unfortunately, right? Okay, one of the traits to actually become Prime Minister of Australia has to be you have to be bordering on being an egomaniac. Right, and bordering on being a narcissist. It's just necessary to put up with what you have to put up with in that career, right? To put up with the intrusion, the media following you every day, the constant background stories, the spearing from your colleagues, the sense of self-worth you have to have, and the belief in yourself. Yeah, I mean, you're somewhere on the spectrum. Normal people, right, don't need that kind of public adulation and public love to feel like they've kind of succeeded and made it. The people who want to be Prime Minister are never satisfied.
Sam, this is a question for you as well. I actually, from my own life and watching people, think reality TV stars and politicians are actually quite similar, and that they're quite narcissistic and full of themselves with a lot of opinions. And you're both of them.
I know. So I'm the worst package.
You're and you should be able to understand it from both sides of this, and what I want to say to you is, when it comes time to you writing a book, are you going to talk about what happened to you, or are you going to worry about all the people that are going to come for you for your story?
No, look, well, let me say two things. Firstly, right, Malcolm did the right thing by writing the book, and putting it out now is the right time. My beef with him on the book, right, and the interview on that, is that I feel that he hasn't had the introspection to realise why people didn't like him, why he fell out in favour, why he'd lost 50, 60 mixed balls or whatever in a row. And then he's made the same mistake that so many people in politics, especially successful people, do, where they project their failure onto others. So if you read the book, and I've tried to, I haven't finished it, right, and see an interview on that, it's always someone else's fault, right? Now, what I've tried to do, I think I've failed at this pretty miserably, but I had a political career implode. You've got to be able to say at the end of it, okay, how did I fail? How am I responsible? What could I have done better? And unfortunately, Australian politics, and you're right, reality TV or media or whatever it is, doesn't breed that into people. In fact, you're rewarded for being Trump rather than being anything else.
Yep.
Well, I think at the end of the day, it's interesting to hear your point of view, and I think it is your point of view. And I'm looking forward to reading Malcolm Turnbull's book, or I'll be listening to it on Audible. I'm not saying I'm a big fan of Malcolm
27 hours
Turnbull.
of Malcolm talking.
Well, look, I'm not the biggest fan of him, but I am interested in the history of Australia, so I will listen to his book. And to be perfectly honest, I'm a little bit naive and a little bit stupid to politics overall, so there's going to be some stuff that goes over my head. But I think it's a good opportunity for us to hear the man's story.
The best one out of the former Prime Minister's books, the absolute best one, without a doubt, it's going to sound odd for me saying this, was Howard's. Lazarus Rising, I think it was called. Howard's autobiography, which sold, by the way, I think it's the best-selling political book, bar Whitlam's book on the dismissal in Australian history. I think it's sold about 130,000, right? Howard's book. But was just this really honest take of why he failed in the 80s, what he learned, how he learned to deal with his party. It was, in a weird way, it was the most kind of, I guess the difference was Howard's book demonstrated a guy who was at peace with himself. Malcolm's book, to me, demonstrates someone who is still torn by losing the Prime Ministership.
It's interesting, Sam, that Turnbull is accusing other people of just wanting power when, as you say, in your opinion, it was Turnbull who just chased power and people like Tony Abbott had the full actual ideological beliefs. But let's take a look at some of the sensational claims he made last night in the 7:30 report. Here's what he said about Tony Abbott's Chief of Staff, Peter Credlin.
I mean, Peter was running the country, and that was obvious, and dominating Abbott. So it was as though she felt, I've created you, you're my creation, and she felt she owned him. It was a truly bizarre relationship.
Sam, was Peter Credlin running the country?
Well, more so than any as much as any individual can, yes. Peter Credlin had an extraordinary amount of power. Look, that, by the way, that was a jab from Malcolm, right? And Peter Credlin's on Sky News, and she uses her post there and did while he was Prime Minister for an hour or 30 minutes or whatever it goes for every night, just trashing Malcolm. So I think there's a bit of score settling there. But yeah, look, Peter Credlin had an extraordinary amount of power. It was delegated power from the Prime Minister. And I think the problem, and I think the unfortunate thing that happened with Peter is that there was legitimate concerns against Peter, and there was also sexism. And when the two got mixed together, it became quite unholy. I think some of the senior ministers in the Conservative government and the media had legitimate concerns about the way she wielded power, and other people just didn't like her because she was a woman.
Okay, Turnbull also claimed that members of the Liberal Party in News Corp were prepared to lose the election to get rid of him. Let's take a look at that. Oh, sorry. I apologise. This is my fault.
Okay.
Here's that clip. No, I've got the clip now.
Well, I mean, Rupert Murdoch, as I relate in the book and in a conversation I had with Murdoch, I mean, Murdoch acknowledges that one of his most senior executives was part of the Abbott plan to bring down the government with the goal of sending us into opposition so that Abbott could come back as leader after the election and bring the party back to victory in 2022. Now, just describing that sounds unhinged, doesn't it? But that was Abbott's agenda, and as Rupert acknowledged to me, it had the support of one of his most senior and most influential editorial executives, and I think it went a lot further than that. So it was crazed, and it was part of Alan Jones's agenda. I mean, they tried to foment a coup at the end of 2017, and I set out all the evidence for that in the book. You know, these were people that were a foreign company controlled by foreign nationals was conspiring to overthrow the Prime Minister of Australia.
Politics is a funny game, Sam. Are power brokers prepared to lose government in order to get rid of those they don't like?
Yeah, they are. I mean, look, everyone's got their own agenda. I think there was two things he said there that was really important that I think you need to touch on. The first one was, are there people who, like Tony Abbott, who genuinely believed that if he lost power for him to become leader because he can save the nation, then yes. You know what? Tony Abbott always saw himself as Churchill. Right? He saw himself as returning, as did Kevin for a long period, saw himself as this great hope that the nation kind of needed. The other point, though, that's really interesting, and I think this is going to be a point in history, was I actually think that what happened with Malcolm in terms of the News Corp media and how the News Corp media turned against him. Look, left-wing politicians have had, News Corp over the years turn against them. That's not a new thing. the way they did it against Malcolm was extraordinary. But also, I think this was the last breaths and the last kind of vestiges of the dying old media. I really do think that even if you go back 2 years to now, the influence and power of, say, the News Corp publications are just not what they used to be. You know, what's on the front page of the Daily Telegraph, the Herald Sun, is nowhere near as significant as it once was. And we're all finding that out now. Like back in the day in politics, you did not get up in the morning and not look at the front pages. What was there defined the day. You know, you know better than I do how the day was set. But the papers would set the radio agenda would set the morning TV agenda, the morning TV agenda would set what you get asked in your press conference at 2 p.m, and what you said at 2 p.m. determined what led the news bulletin that night. That was the agenda. That's how it all worked.
And that's a real
suggest
problem.
to you now that that still happened, that is all still determined by the Murdoch press, to a lesser extent by the now 9 newspapers. It's still happening. So weirdly, the radio and the TV channels are always looking at the front pages, always looking at the news sites to determine what that news agenda is going to be. How will that change, though, do you think? Can it change?
Okay, well, a couple of things. I mean, obviously, shows like this are part of it. It's still there. There's no doubt about it. I mean, you know, they've got buying power. They've got, you know, stables. They've got, you know, editorial staff. Obviously, you know, the finances of a lot of which are probably under question at the moment. But look, it's still there to an extent, but nowhere near what it was. And then, look, let's be honest. The reality is because of the pace of it. You know, this one thing happened. It was last year's budget that actually blew me away. So what used to happen was the Prime Minister, the Treasurer, delivers the budget at 7:30 p.m. on a Tuesday night, right? The next night's news bulletin on the Wednesday night always used to run through what was in the budget. You know, it was kind of the next night, the next day it all ran, and then that night, the next night, the 6 o'clock news would run what's in it. Last year's was the first time they didn't mention a single thing that was in the budget. That was already too old, right? It was only a little bit about the sell of the budget, and the story had moved on. Because now, the pace of it all, and I think a lot of what's happening in politics, and I think what a lot of politicians struggle with, is the certain pace of it all. But look, that kind of news-limited influence that was built on a front page of a paper, is it still there? Yes, definitely, right? If I'm running a Sunrise Today student, whatever, and you guys are the experts on this, I'm obviously not. But of course you're going to see what's on the front page of the papers. But you're also looking at social media. You're also looking at what's trending. Like they're not the only voice in the room. That being said, look, the influence that News Limited and One Company has had in Australian politics is sensational. It's extraordinary, and I think it's interesting to see because Labor politicians have been going on about this forever. I think it's interesting to see a conservative like Malcolm call it out.
Mate, it is interesting that the influence you say that the Murdoch press and other papers have, but it is certainly diminishing because you see the hot topics, you see that what breakfast programs are reporting, and it's not always that front page anymore.
Yeah, without a doubt. And look, I said this thing once that got me into a lot of trouble with the News Limited editor, well, the Australian editor at the time, Mitchell, calling me and abusing me. But I think I said once on an ABC program,
don't tell me Sam's just been... Oh, you're back, Sam. We thought you'd just been censored by the Murdochs.
No, I said this thing once. I got into a lot of trouble, and it was a true fact. You are statistically more likely in Australia to wake up today with bowel cancer than you are to wake up and go buy a copy of The Australian. And that did not go down too well.
Wow, I can imagine. Sam,
with the News Limited people. No, but look, the influence is certainly there, right? The agendas are there, but okay. Stephen Conroy used to have this theory that he used to always say to death. So Stephen Conroy was the communications minister during the Rudd-Gillard government. He tried to do some media censorship laws, were incredibly unpopular, and everybody turned, like the whole media establishment, it was all about privacy, and they all turned on him in this, that. But he had a terrible relationship with the Murdoch press, as bad as you can get. But he used to have this theory. He used to say, to succeed in the Murdoch empire, you have to do one of two things. You have to either make Rupert money or keep Rupert happy. He used, and so he goes, and when the papers stopped being able to make money, they just became ideological mouthpieces because that was the only purpose they had. And I know everyone does funny, dirty things with the books and tries to show them being, profitable. Obviously, I'm sure there is some money online, and Stan is obviously making some money for Fairfax and other things. But it's really hard to believe that these kind of actual printed publications are making any real money, if at all. And you can do whatever you want to the books to make it, try and pretend otherwise.
Mate, the Prime Minister has just announced in a live press conference that elective surgery will again start to recommence. When do you see, and how does the politics play out when dealing with an event like this?
Yeah, look, well, it was really hard because there was this big debate going on. I think, guys, in some kind of private conversation, there was actually a big debate going on in kind of senior Labor circles about, well, to what extent do you, and this is the have get the balance right, to what extent do you try and show national unity and say we support everything, we agree with everything, the government of the day needs our support, and to what extent do you actually come out and be critical and attack them, especially when you think things that are going that are wrong. And that's a really hard place to be in because, you know, there are things that, you know, on the left of politics you can completely disagree with. There are things you obviously support. But at the same time, you don't want to be those people in the middle of a crisis who are going out and screaming. And so I don't know if you followed this at all, but the Labor opposition started demanding that that they include Anthony Albanese in like the cabinet or in the national briefings and this and that. And there was actually a real view on the Labor Party and some senior circles said, you know what, it's better not to be part of that, right? It's better to have your distance because then you can come out and criticise when they've done things wrong. Now, the more specific point you're making is, look, the economic consequence, even in healthcare, of having things like elective surgery and that keep getting delayed is sensational. Like that you can't keep going on this forever. And obviously, I think IVF is the thing that's coming back first. Other bits of elective surgery. Look, at the end of the day, at some point this has to stop. And I think this idea of doing it in a phased way is sensible. I'm just waiting for them to let me start drinking in parks again.
Well, Sam, it has been an absolute pleasure. We have learnt so much. I look forward to our Tuesday's catch-ups. We'll see you next Tuesday, mate. Thank you very much.
I'll see you next week. Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
We're going to move from one legend to an Aussie icon. Ita Buttrose is the chairperson of the ABC, but more importantly, she is the Ben Robin Robbo royal correspondent. Ita Buttrose, can you hear me?
I can indeed.
Ita, it's the Queen's actual birthday today. I think is it 93 or 94th? And she's not
94.
having... 94. Thank you very much. I knew you'd get it right. That was a test for you, Ita. But why is she not having a big pomp and ceremony today?
Well, she doesn't think it's appropriate. You know, Britain has got horrendous coronavirus figures, and the Prime Minister is still not fully recovered and back at work yet. And she thought it was inappropriate when the country was facing such a crisis that she should celebrate her birthday. Because normally there are cannons fired and all sorts of celebrations, but she's decided she's going to have a quiet day. She's in isolation at Windsor Castle with Prince Philip, who's 98. They're amazing. The pair of them.
It is amazing. And Ita, you have basically been following the royals for a long time. In fact, your first byline happened at 17 when you were following, you were on duty covering Princess Alexandria.
Yes, Princess Alexandra. That's right. She's the Queen's cousin, and she came to Australia in 1959 for the Queensland Centenary celebrations, and they were huge. But, you know, more than 300,000 people turned out in Brisbane to welcome the princess. She was sort of the Princess Diana of that era, the young princess. And because I was still a teenager and I was a cadet journalist on the Daily and Sunday Telegraph women's pages, it was decided that they would send a young reporter to cover the young princess, and that's how I got this amazing gig. And it was 3 weeks in Queensland, and the press party was about 40 journalists and photographers, and we flew in a Fokker Friendship plane all over Queensland, Lindeman Island, Rocky, Cairns.
Is that what started the love affair with the royals? Is that what started the love affair with the royals, getting to fly in all this luxury?
Well, it was very luxurious for a 17-year-old girl from Sydney, you know, who didn't even have a ball gown. My mother had to take me shopping to get a ball gown because there were about 7 or 8 formal balls for the princess, and you were expected to dress appropriately. So you had to wear an evening dress. So it was very exciting. My first full-length evening dress as well.
Ben.
Ita, it is so lovely to have you on the show. I've always been a big fan of your entire career. In my family, actually, so my grandparents and my mother were such big fans of yours. So it's kind of a little bit, I'm a bit starstruck talking to you right now, to be honest with you.
It's very sweet of you.
But I will say, while we're talking about the royals, why do you think that, here in Australia, we get so much comfort from the Queen still?
Because in a world of amazing change, she's remained in our lives. I mean, she's been in our lives for a very long period. She is, as we've said, 94, and she's always been there. She's been a pillar of conservative rule, and she's had a lot of experience with prime ministers, that's for sure. And I think it's just that we've grown accustomed to her face.
And Ita, the Queen's messages are always so important. Recently, we had the Corona speech that she gave, but there was some criticism that the ABC didn't take that when it was released to the world at 5 a.m. What's your reaction to that criticism? Is it fair?
Well, I think it's ridiculous, quite frankly, because we did have it on radio, and people seem to forget the ABC has lots of radio stations. So we did take the Queen's message on radio, and we decided that we would broadcast it on television at 5 to 7 in the evening before the news, because that's a prime spot. That's where these sorts of announcements goes. It was primarily an announcement to British citizens, not to the Commonwealth.
And it wasn't live.
No, it wasn't live. She pre-recorded it. So I think it was just one of those. I think people have a lot of time on their hands at the moment, Rob, and it seems something we might all just sort of have a go at us. But I think our decision to broadcast the Queen's message at 5 to 7 was a much better time to have it. That's when people are switched on. And at the moment, because of the virus, all news programs and ours in particular are rating very highly because people are tuning in. So more people would have seen the Queen at 5 to 7 than I guess if we put it on at 5 o'clock in the morning.
I can see Robbo's chomping at the bit. It's a bit of a reunion for you and Robbo. Robbo, what do you want to say?
It surely is. Ms. Buttrose, lovely to speak to you again. How are you?
I'm well, thanks, Robbo.
Yeah, that's good. Now, I'm part of the Republican movement, but in a weird way, not the actual Republican movement. I want to see kind of the Queen of Australia, and I'm just kind of sending out the feelers now, but I think I found my girl. Are you available to be the Queen of Australia, Ida Buttrose?
Robert, you love being provocative, but of course, everyone in Australia, I think, has come to the decision that as long as the Queen is alive, she will remain our sovereign and she'll remain the head of the Commonwealth. After the Queen has died, I wouldn't be surprised if there was a movement in Australia for a republic. So I think we'll just have to see what happens. But, I wouldn't be surprised if we decided that maybe we'll just go it on our own. But having said that, there are many who argue that the laws and the Constitution that we inherit, the Westminster system of government that we inherited from the UK, have been to our benefit and not to our detriment.
Ita, we are very quickly running out of time. You know what I'm like on getting out on time from our days at Studio 10. There's so much we want to cover with you, but I really need to talk to you very quickly about magazines in this country. We've seen that Bauer Magazines has folded in New Zealand, where there has been some toing and froing about whether they will continue and absorb Pac Mags, and that looks as though it is happening here in this country. They're taking that from Channel 7. How do you see the future of magazines in this country? Is there a future? Oh no, we've lost Ita right at the time when we had her for that very big question. Look, we have run out of time anyway. Maybe we can get Ita back on the line tomorrow to finish that question and so much more. We covered the big topic. Maybe Ita doesn't want to answer that question. Actually, I know that's not true. I know she's very keen to answer that question. Boys, thank you very much for another episode of the Ben, Rob and Robbo Show. I actually think things have gone rather well today. We've had a few issues, but we're sorting it out, and we appreciate all the great feedback we got from everyone yesterday. So thank you very much. We will see you tomorrow, Ben and Robbo. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Like my big wave. Bye.